know who this guy is, other than the fact he's just flippin' amazing, is because Frederick Douglass was actually the most photographed American of the 19th century. He made it his personal mission to be taken, have his photo taken as frequently as humanly possible. In fact, Frederick Douglass appears in 160 separate portraits. Abraham Lincoln only got 126. In the world at that time, the only people who were more photographed than Frederick Douglass were the British royal family, the British Prime Minister, and an actress in Britain named Ellen Terry, who was basically Beyonce that day. There was a very deliberate reason Frederick Douglass did this. He actually lectured about it several times. He believed in representation, though he didn't call it at that time. What he thought was that in order to be able to start reform or make progress, you had to be able to picture yourself outside of yourself. Look at that image, compare it to what is actually happening, and then make change or criticism from there. Based on that same idea, the LLCs this month are putting on 2 events about representation. You're at this one tonight, miles to go. We're going to talk about graphic novels and comic books. Next week at South Campus at the same time, we're going to be discussing, it's called More Than a Half-Life, and it will deal with representation in video games. So if you're a gamer, next Tuesday night, South Campus, the Wilson Center Lakeside Room, we'll expect to see you there as well. All right, we're going to get started tonight with Professor Dustin Harewood, who is an art professor at our 10th campus, and he's going to talk to you about the miles we have to go. Dustin?
Thank you. How are you guys doing tonight? All right.
Great.
Okay, so when I was asked to do this, I was thinking about the fact that on one hand, I didn't feel qualified to talk about comic books now because I haven't collected comic books in quite a while. I think I collected comic books from probably around the age like 8 to maybe about like 20. I'm 38 years old now. Okay, so it's been a while. All right, so when this came up, and this idea of Black Spider-Man, like at first I wasn't even aware of him, and I had to go back and do my research, where I hit up the comic book shop, and I actually have, I had the guy pull out a bunch of comics that I went to read up on, so I can even catch up on the idea that we had this new Spider-Man. So let me give you a brief background on why I think I am qualified a little bit to talk about this whole black superhero thing. So I was born and I grew up in Brooklyn, New York until I was about 11 years old. But I grew up in a part of Brooklyn which was all, I think my school was all black and Puerto Rican. So I didn't remember being a minority then, all right? After New York, I went to high school in Barbados. Anyone know where Barbados is? What's that? Oh, no. That's it. See, the Bahamas is more American, right? Barbados is further east. That's where Rihanna's from. Okay, yes. Yeah, so I went to high school in Barbados. Barbados is like 90% black. So, high school there, I was not a minority either. All right? I think the first time, and then when I left and came back to the United States to study, I went to a historically black college called NCCU in North Carolina, right? It was not a minority. Again, this was in Durham, North Carolina. So I think the first time that I remember being a minority in a certain situation was my summer internship. And this is going to be a really cheesy picture, but this is one of the only ones I have. That's bad, but I mean, I only have like 2 or 3. So I was a summer intern in the summer of 2000 at Marvel Comics in the X-Men office. And those are, okay, and this was the editor-in-chief of all the X-Men books at the time, Mark Powers, and this was the assistant editor, Pete Franco. So I worked for about 2 months in the X-Men office, which was a privilege, 387 Park Avenue South. And I remember I was digging through all comics, so these were the 2 comics where I was directly involved with scanning in the artwork, sending the pencils to the inker, scanning in the inks, sending off these covers to be approved by the Comic Book Code of Authority, you know. And then when the comics came out, I was supposed to bag up like 6 books each and send it to everyone who participated. One of the things I realized, which was really disappointing, was that no artist actually worked there at 387 Park Avenue South. All the artists worked around the country and would FedEx their art in every morning. So I'd pick up a bunch of FedEx boxes. And it was kind of disappointing because I was an art major in college. And I was like, oh, I get to see these guys make stuff. No, I didn't. But what was interesting was in this situation, I realized that something was a little different. I was in a situation where I was like the only black person in this whole office. And I can't tell if it was because it was New York City and it was Marvel Comics, why they were cold. People I worked with were kind of cold and distant. But, I mean, you know, we're hugging up there, but these guys, you know, we weren't close. All right, now, this girl, she was a little younger and she was pretty cool. Polly was her name. I talked to her a little bit every now and then. What was cool about her was that she was the assistant editor for Spider-Man and all the Spider-Man comics. And Spider-Man was my favorite superhero. And way back in I'm about to date myself, I don't care. But back in 1988, I think Spider-Man was the first comic book I ever bought. Right? So they were right next door to us. She was pretty sweet. She was a very sweet girl. She was not as big of a jerk as the other guys were. So, but what I realized though, this was a situation where, it was one of the first situations where I realized I was a minority, and I actually wasn't relating much to the people I was working with. Right? And I realized after, because when my internship was over, I actually realized instead of loving comic books more, I actually kind of was over it by then. And I couldn't figure it out until later, why I felt that way. I realized that when I went there, I think I was looking for mentorship of some sort, and I didn't get that. And it was hard for me to connect with the people I was working with. I think that's why now I mentor so many people. It's because I always vowed that I would not be that way, all right? To any of the kids that came my way, all right? So I figured because of this experience, I can talk a little bit about this whole comic book thing, and I wanted to focus more on the people making the books, because they're the ones responsible for these characters, right? So, Marvel Comics was around for quite a while, but what I'm interested in, and I'm talking Marvel today, I'm not talking DC, or Valiant, Dark Horse, or any of the others. I was always a Marvel kid, Spider-Man, Hulk, Avengers, all that stuff. So I figured I'm going to stick with my Marvel stuff. So, Stan Lee and Jack Kirby. Jack Kirby did all the drawing, character development, along with Stan Lee, who did a lot of the writing and editing. And I went through a lot of Stan Lee interviews, trying to figure out his thought process. This is 1961. So this is one of the first collaborations they had done. So we're talking November 1961, they made the Fantastic Four. Yes? Listening to Stan Lee talk in a few interviews, I was trying to gauge how he came up with these characters. And what I kept hearing him say over and over was, I wanted to make characters based on the average American. I wanted to make characters like myself, or people I knew. Well, I guess that's why there weren't a lot of minorities, right? And I don't think it was anything insidious. I think it was just a genuine byproduct of who they were. So in May 1962, these two guys again collaborated and created the Incredible Hulk, right? These guys are major figures standing between Stan Lee and Jack Kirby. And then in August of 1962, Stan Lee came up with this guy, all right? And so with the origins of this original Spider-Man, what was so interesting about Stan Lee? So Stan Lee was the guy who was saying, I don't want my superheroes to be perfect. I want them to be flawed, right? So I want them to be real people with real problems. So I don't want this big, strong man. What I want is a high school kid who's a bit of a nerd, who has trouble socially, okay? And when you draw him, I don't want him to look like a big, strong man. I want him to look like an average kid. And I think that was the genius of Stan Lee, right? Because since then, a lot of comic book characters have kind of followed this idea of the not-so-perfect superhero. But the funny thing is, because we begin and end with this whole idea of Spider-Man, the other thing about it was, I remember he said he pitched Spider-Man to his editor at the time, and the editor said, "Spider? People hate spiders. That's a horrible idea for a superhero. Who's going to want to follow a spider as a hero?" And then here's another thing. Teenagers can only be sidekicks, like Robin from Batman and Robin. You can't have a teenager be like the head hero. That's not how this whole thing works.
Stanley didn't believe in sidekicks either.
Boy, all right. And this is actually, though, the guy who helped, I have to rephrase it. This is actually the guy who helped create what Spider-Man looked like. So he came up with them, Steve Ditko. I want to get to the guys who created it because, like I said, I feel like it's really important. And the years that it created also, because that's 1962. Okay? 1962 also, Stan Lee, Jack Kirby, Thor. But what is Thor based on?
North Smith.
Could you? Go ahead. Go for it.
Come all up here.
Go for it.
Thor is based on North Smith, specifically the Poetas, I think they are. So it's it's like the Greek pantheon, except colder, basically, and a whole bunch wider.
It sounds so much better than if I said it there, right? Thank you, right? It's this idea of these Greek gods, obviously, being the ultimate, right? So, we've got that. So this is 1962. So what are the other things going on during that time? 1963, Stan Lee again, but that's Don Heck. I tried to find pictures of all these white guys to put in there. These are the creators. Okay? But you can't blame that because, I mean, what are you going to do if you're going to make a character? What are you going to reference? You're going to reference what you know. You're going to reference who you are and all the people around you, right? Isn't that natural? Now, you know what's really funny, though? When I started drawing my own comic books when I was 8 years old, I remember my first 3 characters. None of them were black. They were all white. Now that's the odd part. So why would I, growing up in Brooklyn around a bunch of blacks and Puerto Ricans, be drawing white superheroes? All right? So this is 1963. So what was going on? That's 1963 also. Ditko made him up. I'm trying to think of all the movies you guys might know. All right, but what happened in 1963? So while these characters are being made, 1963, August, Martin Luther King, right, is delivering his speeches. Can you imagine, so the climate of the country and where we are? So I'm talking about all those heroes that being made, all these major heroes a year, 2 years before this happens. So we have to think about then, obviously, what is the temperature of the United States? So 63, so that was August. So who was made in September? Stan Lee and Jack Kirby again. You know, Jack Kirby, they say that he never got the full credit, that Stan Lee got all of the credit and accolades and most of the money. But Jack Kirby is actually the guy who's helping make all those guys. And 63 also, look at what these guys made, my goodness. Right, that's why if you're into this stuff, you gotta know who Stan Lee and Jack Kirby are. Right, they put all these guys together too. In 1965, so this is 63. Malcolm X was assassinated in 1965. Looking at this time, when we have all of these major characters, and I was just trying to take these parallels and try to figure out what is going on as far as race relations are concerned in this country. On the other hand, we have these comic books, of course, geared to children, but, what is the climate of the time? So Black Panther was introduced in 1966. So we have Malcolm X died in 65. Interesting that July of 66, then Stan Lee and Jack Kirby come up with the Black Panther, which is like the first black superhero that they've introduced into the Marvel world. Okay? His movie's coming out, it's pushed back, right? I think it's supposed to come out this year.
2018.
2018. Yeah. Gosh, I hope it's good. I hope it's good. All right. They claim that his name did not relate back to the Black Panther Party, and actually it was a time where they had to change the name to Black Leopard because too many people thought that they were referring to the Black Panther Party. But they later changed it back because no one liked Black Leopard. So we're talking about that's 66. In 68, we know that Martin Luther King was assassinated. Just think about all of these things, these parallels. So when we're talking about this idea of race in the country, the 68, 69 Guardians of the Galaxy were made. Now, interesting, that's not Stanley or Jack Kirby, so this is a little different here. And obviously they reshuffled the Guardians of the Galaxy. They don't look like that anymore. That's 69, 1972. Look at the creators of Luke Cage. I love it. I was kind of shocked when I was doing my research. Like, they made Luke Cage, and it was Stan and Jack that actually made Black Panther. So you're not even having black artists and black writers making these characters. You're actually having these Caucasian men actually decide, you know what, we might need some diversity. And I'm glad they were actually sensitive enough with all the turbulence of the times to decide to interject these characters, all right, into the mix. I remember this, other than Storm from X-Men, I remember Captain Marvel being part of the Avengers, the West Coast Avengers, and I remember between her and Storm were the first times I think I'd seen black women in the mix as far as comic books were concerned. And now we know now, so this is quite recent, and I have the comic books here. So Miles Morales, so his parents, the new Spider-Man, what they've done is they've made an alternate universe, and what's so interesting was I interned in 2000, and when I went and did the research, this Marvel Ultimate Universe started toward the end of 2000, just soon after I left. Marvel was going through a second bankruptcy. It was going through multiple bankruptcies. This is before the movies came and saved all this. Okay? So when I was there, they were shooting the first Spider-Man, and they were shooting the first X-Men, but they hadn't come out yet. Right? Obviously, things have changed now, right? And these comic heroes rule the world, all right? But now, so we have Miles Morales, whose father is African American and mother is Puerto Rican. And as far as I know, one of the creators is of Hispanic descent. The artist is a white woman. But they said in this climate, especially after Barack Obama, that they have an opportunity to reimagine Spider-Man in this alternate universe. So this Marvel Ultimate Universe was created after they went through a bankruptcy. They decided that they had to reboot a lot of the characters because how could a casual reader enter into comic books if you've got storylines that have been going for almost 50 years? That's too heavy. So they felt like they would reboot all these guys and reimagine them. And this is part of one of the reboots of Spider-Man. So, I think that's about it for me. Yes. So yes, if you guys want to keep in contact with me at all, if you are on Instagram, come find me. It's just Dustin Harewood. All right? All right? For any of you who would like to talk some more, whether it's art or these characters or anything else, okay? So that's all I've got for today. I'm going to turn things over to Marq. All right, thank you.
We all appreciate the promotional image. I don't have one, so I'm just letting you know. But if I would have known,
come find me. Come find me.
But this is a very interesting topic, especially learning about the history of comic books and then the writers. And then we get to see, who's coming up with these characters that we fall in love with or that we probably don't know about. So Marvel and DC, they have a very extensive history with all sorts of iconic, amazing, and really cool characters and franchises. Some of them have impacted culture so much that they've become household names, like the X-Men, the Avengers, or maybe on the DC side with Teen Titans or Justice League. But what I'm going to be talking about today are the lesser known series that don't have as much of the spotlight, but they're equally as cool. So as a POC, person of color, I get really, really excited, just to give you some terminology, drop that knowledge, boom. But I could just be explicit and say as a black guy, I love seeing other black and brown characters in mainstream titles. But when I was doing my research, I got really excited because I saw more black and brown characters in the lesser known series of Marvel and DC. And it's really awesome because they're like hidden gems. So that's what we're going to talk about. And we're going to go ahead and start with DC. So the first character I want to cover is Captain Leah Corbin. Her alias is 4D. So her abilities, she has superhuman durability and strength. And she also has reality alteration. So what that means is she can alter reality from the second dimension, third dimension, and fourth dimension. Her first appearance was in Justice League of America, number 24. So a little bit about Captain Leah Corbin. She was a member of the Marine Corps. And so her and 3 other Marines, they volunteered to participate in General Eling's Ultramarine project. And so what that involved was genetic modification and manipulation. And so she was implanted with an activated metagene. So this gives her automatic access to her powers. And then those 4 soldiers, they became the Ultramarine Corps. So it's pretty cool. Next character I want to talk about is Black Lightning. Still on the DC side, Jefferson Pierce is known as Black Lightning, and his powers are mainly with electric manipulation, hand-to-hand combat, and electromagnetic repulsion. So he's all about lightning. Pretty obvious right there. And his first appearance was Black Lightning number 1. So what's interesting about him, he grew up on the south side of Metropolis. So think of it like, you know, he was in the not so good area when he grew up. But what I like about this character is that from the south side, he came up, became a gold medal winning Olympic decathlete, and then he came back to the south side, became a principal, and really just started helping out his community and fighting crime. He later joined Batman's group, the Outsiders, and he also assisted the Justice League of America. And a fun fact about Black Lightning, he was the replacement for Black Bomber. So who's familiar with the name Black Bomber? Cool, okay, one person knows who Black Bomber is. So this is an interesting story. Black Bomber was supposed to be originally DC's first black superhero, but he definitely got chopped because his identity, his normal day-to-day identity, was a Vietnam vet who was also a racist white man. And his superpower was to turn into a black man. Yeah, so that didn't fly too well. And so they even had 2 issues already written, ready for Black Bomber. But then the creator of Black Lightning said, you know what? Let's not go through with that. How about this character that's actually black? That's a pretty cool fact about Black Lightning. Next up, Crimson Avenger. This is actually the 3rd Crimson Avenger. And her alias is Jill Carlisle, and her powers, she has teleportation, intangibility, she has perfect accuracy, and she has unlimited ammo, which is really cool. And she's seemingly immortal, but I'll talk about that in the next slide. And her first appearance was Stars and Stripe number 9. So a little bit about Jill Carlisle. She was a former lawyer, and she had a case, but she lost it, even though the defendant was clearly guilty. So she was very upset about it and obtained 2 twin Colt pistols from the original Crimson Avenger. But those pistols actually cursed her. So her curse is that she has an eternally bleeding bullet wound on her chest, and now she's assigned to kill every person who killed her target. So she's, the seemingly immortal part is that she even tried to kill herself, and it actually offed her life and teleported her to the next mission. So she would get the memories and the abilities of someone who died and find out their assailant, and from that point on, she has to go and avenge the fallen person. So she's a really cool character. Next up, we have Nubia. Still the same, she just had a slight name change and appearance change, but this is the first Nubia without the apostrophe in. Her powers, she is essentially a black Amazonian. So she has divine empowerment, she has superhuman abilities, she also has this technique called cold sight, which I'll talk about in a little bit, and she has exceptional hand-to-hand combat. Her first appearance was in Wonder Woman number 204, and she actually beat the brakes off of Wonder Woman. So that was pretty cool. But when she got reimagined, she had an entirely new look. She did fight Princess Diana and claim the title of the one true Wonder Woman in her original iteration. But then afterwards, they gave her a backstory. So when Princess Diana was created, Nubia was also created as well. So you had one lump of clay that became Diana, another lump of clay that became Nubia. Well, Nubia was abducted at birth by Mars and raised by Mars. And so throughout her life, her and Diana actually crossed paths. And so Diana found out about this history and found out that Nubia was being controlled by a ring that Mars had gave her. So she took the ring off, broke the spell, and then Nubia and Princess Diana, they made sure Mars wasn't having it no more, so they had to run him off real quick. And she currently lives in the underworld with her lover, Ahura Mazda. And then that cold sight ability, she got that from one of her missions. So she actually assisted the Gorgons, and now she has the ability to paralyze one of her targets. So that's really awesome. And to wrap up DC, we have Icon. How many people have heard about Icon? Okay, 2 people. Cool, you went up one, that's all good. So Icon, he is immensely dope. His name is Arnis, but he later changes it to Augustus Freeman IV. His powers, his powers are superhuman abilities, flight, formidable hand-to-hand combat, positron energy blast, near invulnerability, healing factor. He pretty much has it all. And his first appearance was in Icon #1. So a little backstory about him, he follows a similar line as Superman, where he's an alien, and he's originally from Terminus. Well, when he landed on Earth, his space pod had told him to take on the appearance of the first sentient life form that he came across. And that turns out to be his adopted mother, Miriam. So he grows up, goes through time, and he later changed his identity from Arnis to Augustus Freeman, which was the great-grandson of his baby form, or his original form. So the way he stumbled upon his powers, he was actually getting robbed. One of the robbers ran away, but then the other robber stayed by she witnessed it, and she said, wait a minute, you have powers? You need to be a superhero. And so Icon was born, and she became his sidekick, Rocket. And Icon is so powerful, he fought on par with Superman in the Worlds Collide comic books. So now we're going to transition over to the Marvel side. And we're going to talk about first, Black Goliath. It's pretty dope. He goes by the name Dr. Bill Foster, that's his real identity, and his powers range from superhuman strength to size and mass manipulation. I think the largest he could get up to was about 25 feet, and so the larger he got, the stronger he got. And his first appearance was in Power Man #24. Little history on him, he was born in Watts, Los Angeles, California. He's a brilliant biochemist, and he was actually a biochemist for Tony Stark's plans and research division at his Baltimore plant. He assisted the original Goliath, or the Goliath before him, Dr. Hank Pym. He also battled Ragnarok, who was a clone of Thor, but unfortunately he died in that battle. Next, we're going to talk about Charcoal. Not my favorite name, it was kind of, they could have got a bit more creative, but it's all good. And his name is Charlie Burlingame. His powers range from fire manipulation to carbon form and carbon formation. So that means he could take the form of anything that's made out of carbon, ranging from charcoal to diamond. And his first appearance was in the Thunderbolts #19. A little bit about him, and this is his regular form. He briefly helped the Imperial forces, but they took over a small town in Colorado, but they were ran out by the Thunderbolts. So he said, well, you know what? Why stick with the losing team? I'm about to get with the winning team. Ran off the Imperial forces and ended up joining the Thunderbolts, which is pretty cool. But unfortunately, he battled and was killed in battle against Graviton. And a fun fact about him, he wasn't supposed to be an actual hero. He actually came from fan art to be a villain. So Wizard Entertainment magazines had a contest to create a villain. So a fan made the artwork, turned out it was the charcoal that we saw before, and then once Marvel received it, with some legalities, they had to change some certain things around, and then also kind of give credit to the artist. And then that's how we have this charcoal here, or Charlie Burlingame. Next, we have Spectrum, who was earlier referenced as Captain Marvel. Her name is Monica Rambeau. She is so dope. So her powers range from electromagnetic transformation, flight, and she can travel at light speeds. So with electromagnetic transformation, she can transform into any form of energy on the electromagnetic spectrum. That means she can turn into X-rays, gamma rays, cosmic rays, light, electricity. She can do it all. And her first appearance as Spectrum was in the Mighty Avengers Volume 2, number 1. She originally donned the aliases as Captain Marvel, Photon, and Pulsar. So she had a whole lot of names, but now she's known as Spectrum. She was born in New Orleans, Louisiana, and she was eventually exposed to extra-dimensional energy, which thus gave her her powers. And once she was, when she was Captain Marvel, she was also the leader of the Avengers. So she accomplished a lot in her comic lifespan. And then we have Blue Marvel. Blue Marvel is also dope. His real name is Adam Bernard Bashir, and his abilities range from superhuman abilities, flight, invulnerability, healing factor, antimatter energy generation, bioluminescence, and molecular manipulation. So he's like all over the place. And with the bioluminescence, that means he can internally glow, so his body just lights up, which is really cool. His first appearance was Adam, Legend of the Blue Marvel number 1. Little history on him, and what's cool about this character is that he was written by a black author. So that's really, really awesome, considering we just talked about so many heroes that have been created by white authors and white artists. So with him being created by a black author, he was a former fullback and a graduate of Cornell University. He graduated with both his master's and his PhD. So he was on point. He wasn't playing. Steve Malone's was probably crazy though. Then,
So the black authors gave him all these degrees.
right, we had to be extra, it was like, since I'm writing a story, we're going to give you like 8 degrees, stuff you ain't gonna need, but it's all good.
It's not our representation, man.
Exactly, it's like, look, I got one shot, I'm gonna make it count. So he was also the project lead on harnessing antimatter, so that's how he gained his antimatter abilities. He's strong enough to fight one of Marvel's strongest characters, Sentry.
For reference on that, like Sentry stood in between 2 universes that collapsed and survived, like 2 scratches. So yeah.
That means he's like, yeah. So he's powerful. Blue Marvel is powerful. And what's cool about him, there's even more history with him. So he came around, his existence or timeline was around the 1960s. So he received the Presidential Medal of Freedom for President JFK, but he had to retire from being a superhero on the same day he received this award because he's a black superhero. So the president says, you know what? I understand you saving the world, saving us from all these cataclysmic, catastrophic events, but you're gonna have to chill because I don't know how people are gonna take a black superhero saving. Originally he wore a mask, but it was taken off during battle, and that's why that whole scenario happened. So he ended up retiring as a superhero, but he did later come back because he saw some people in trouble, had to handle business, and that's what he knows best. So it's very important to talk about all of these characters, and it's really awesome to see so many other characters that look like us. It's like, what? We have Blue Marvel, Crimson Adventure, Black Lightning. It's amazing because we can see more stories and learn about more stories and characters that we can find some type of relation to, and we can hopefully see them on a mainstream level, in movies, TV shows, animated cartoons, maybe even some anime. That would be really dope. But also, this gives us even more inspiration to cosplay. And on that note, I'll hand it off to Angela Gaines. Woo!
Hello.
Hey.
So I am Angela, and I am a cosplayer, or a cosplayer, which means costume play. So basically we find characters that we like to fabricate and bring to life. I've been cosplaying for about 7 years. Oh, wait.
Oh, I have Misty night. But if y'all know about Misty night, talk about it afterwards. I got y'all. I promise. See, let's get through the level.
Left her out, man.
I did. Blue Marvel was so hype. I'm sorry.
I've been cosplaying for about 7 years with my good friend. You see both of us in a picture up there. When we first started cosplaying, there weren't many black characters out, or at least black characters that we were familiar with. So for the most part, we will cosplay as anime characters. Does anybody know what anime happens to be? Yeah. Can anybody tell me what it is?
Japanese animation.
Yes, Japanese animation. And the main one we would cosplay as, it was Bleach, because there was such a variety of characters in this particular show. Some of them had a little bit of a tan, some of them you couldn't quite tell if they were black or not, but it was enough for us. Not only that, but we could also buy the outfits on eBay. That just made life so much easier for us. Once we got better at sewing and fabricating weapons and things like that, we began looking at some more Western cartoons like My Little Pony, as well as looking at just off-the-wall things like creepy dolls. You can see the My Little Pony on the picture on my right, and then the creepy dolls on the picture on my left. So we got a lot more attention for those particular characters, probably because it was much easier for people to be able to see a person of color as those characters. It was easier for them to see us as these characters than it was for us to see them as, Bleach characters. You would think it wouldn't make a difference because it's a cartoon, but it does. Okay. But as we went along, we began to see more and more characters coming out. We began to see the community of cosplayers growing. You can usually find many of these communities in Black Girl Nurse, which is a website dedicated to comics, just nerd stuff, including cosplay. There's also Black Nerd Problems, and there's one other site that does just strictly Black cosplay, which is Cosplay While Black. It was great to be able to see so many other people, men and women alike of color, cosplaying as these characters, because you didn't feel like you were alone. Most of the time when we went to conventions, we would, one of maybe a few, and anytime you saw another Black person, you're like, oh my God, you're Black, I'm Black, we're cosplaying, let's take a picture together. But it's so rare to see. And because we saw, and because the community began to grow, I feel like maybe Marvel began to take notice that we were out there, that we do like seeing ourselves in comics, that, and we will bring their characters to life. Which brings me to Zinzi. Zinzi is the villain in the new Black Panther series. She's the villain, and she just wants to watch the world burn. She actually has the ability to take people's deepest emotions. She can read them and then manipulate them. And right now, she's all about manipulating people's rage. Yes.
Yes.
And she's pretty amazing. They're not quite sure how she got her powers. She was experimented on for some time, so that may have been how she ended up with these powers. But she's a pretty awesome character. When I first saw her, I said, I really want to cosplay as her. We look similar. I can get my hair to do what she's doing. The only thing I would have to fix is the extreme crop top. So I can't come to work looking so, and besides her, there are also quite a few other characters that not only have I seen other people begin to cosplay, but I went to cosplay at a certain time. Okay. And it brings me to the new school. First we have NBC Power Girl, also known as Tanya. She is replacing the old Power Girl right now. Cara Zor-El, I believe her name was. You will probably recognize her. She wore a leotard. Was it large boob window, and she was very powerful. She was related to Superman, but she would also fly around saving the world. But now she's replaced by Tanya. She is also very powerful. She also is a genius, which is great. Because
Much better than a good window.
yes.
They replaced it.
Next we have Luana Lafayette. She is in Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur. She's actually replacing Moon Boy, which used to be in Devil Dinosaur. She's in Inhuman. Does anybody know what an Inhuman is?
I do this for a living, sorry.
Oh, okay. Do you mind?
Oh, yeah. So the humans are basically like X-Men. So there are two mutant genes that you have, the X gene and the Terrigen gene. So Terrigens come from, well, I'll say the Kree. They have a meteorite that kind of came down, put out a whole bunch of things called Terrigen mist. Right now, there's a mist or a cloud of Terrigen factors that are going around the world, and it's literally turning people into humans. So when you think of the humans, think of X-Men, just great value brand.
Oh,
Hey, I love my goal, but you cannot stand up and stop.
Dollar Tree next man.
Hey, literally, you don't, this is the only time we've really had the Inhumans. Any other time there's been like just a replacement thing.
In Dollar Tree.
The thing about Lunella is that she hasn't like come across that mist yet, so she doesn't know what kind of power she would have. But she does come across this dinosaur at a certain point, and they go around with different adventures. I just started reading the comic, but she actually starts out as kind of a jerk. She's a super genius, and she's still in. Yes.
She just like finds a random dinosaur.
So there was a dimensional rift that opened up, and Devil Dinosaur kind of walked through into her closet, but she got a black mama, so her mama was like, "You need to get that dinosaur out of my house."
That sounds all right.
Yes, she is the smartest one in Marvel right now, at least. Next up, we have Riri Williams. I haven't had a chance to read this particular comic yet, but I want to. She, Tony Stark, Iron Man, the original Iron Man, decided to retire. And in comes Riri Williams, who is also a technological genius. And she starts to don the Iron Man suit, and she flies around known as Ironheart. So they recently had some issues with a variant artist for Riri Williams. He kind of drew her like a grown woman, and people got really upset, so they began taking down that particular variant cover. But after the dust settled, he did eventually come out with a sketch that made her look more like a teenager because she is in high school.
She's an MIT. She's an MIT. I read the first few issues, and the first armor she was using, it was one of Tony Stark's old armors that, when he was trying to escape from the Mandarin, and that's what, I think she basically stole it.
No, she redesigned it. She built it in her room, like literally just on a whim. She just built it, and when her roommates called the cops, she was like, "Well, I'm done with school. Bye," and just flew off.
Riri was too smart, way too smart for high school, so they she was super gifted, so they put her at MIT instead.
Yeah, she's just still like 13, 14. So like that's why it was a real big issue.
And even MIT was she wasn't interested in MIT either. There was a chance that she might get kicked out for doing what she did.
Being a neighbor.
And next, there have been a lot of independent comic makers who have also begun to fill in the gaps, which has been wonderful because it gives you a lot more opportunity to be able to see the characters like yourself and more characters to be able to cosplay. So Dee from the Rat Queens is actually one of my favorite comics. She is actually part of a cult that she eventually ran away from. But she's a lot like me. She can be pretty introverted, but she's also the reasonable one of her crew of, for lack of a better term, badass women. So, but they've been on a bit of a hiatus, but from what I understand, they're coming back in March of this year, so I'm hoping to see more of them soon. Next, we have Gwendolyn of Saga. Saga is one of my absolute favorite comics. It's been described as a mix between Game of Thrones and Star Wars, and it really is. I don't know really how to explain it to you. More beyond that, you will have to read it because it's out there, but it's a fantastic storyline. And then, who doesn't know who Michonne is? Michonne. You don't know who Michonne is?
No. She's from Walking Dead, ain't it?
She's from The Walking Dead, yeah. She is a sword-wielding woman with dreadlocks who has 2 zombies as slaves. She is amazing. So if you ever get the chance to be able to either read the comic or watch the series, I would strongly suggest that you do so.
There's the video game for her too.
Yeah.
The one with
Oh, yeah,
the
so she's well, like, no, she's like, in the comic book, she has a whole different story from what she did in the actual show. Like, she's legit one of the best in the land. And, yeah,
But yeah, she is absolutely amazing. The actress on the television show is amazing as well. I did not get a chance to see her at MegaCon because of reasons, but oh no. But yeah, the actress who plays her is also incredibly amazing. What's great about these characters is that there is a range of personality. There's a range of personality that are all incredibly intelligent. And something else that a lot of people don't usually, something else that people usually take for granted, they all have different hairstyles, which is amazing. Normally, you would get the short crop, or their hair would be perfectly straight like Storm, but it's as if they're figuring out that Black women have more than one type of hairstyle, which is nice. So this is how we know that things are coming along much better than they used to. Yeah. So.
Okay, we left a little bit of time at the end. Do you guys have any questions for Mark or Dustin or Angela tonight? Of course you do. I love you. You're my A student tonight. You're great. What you got?
all right, so this one's for Mark and Dustin. We've been having changing of guard, as I love to say. There are a lot of characters that they switched up, giving new life to. Like as you said, with Miles Morales taking over for Peter Parker after he died. We also have Sam getting the shield from Steve. We also had Wally West coming from an Irish redheaded kid to also now Iris West's little cousin. A lot of people say they're just making characters black for blackness' sake. How do you feel about the representation now that you have in comic books than what we had before?
Well, can I first start off by saying, so I don't appreciate, like, I feel really old right now. I was like mostly an 80s kid, 90s kid. So what's funny is all these people they just talked about, remember when I started saying, I don't know if I'm qualified, is because I'm not familiar with any of these characters. All the ones that when I was reading the books, I didn't have any of these characters. So all of my heroes were white men.
Okay.
So she-
And I realize that fully now. And by watching this and listening to her and listening to him, that's been confirmed. The idea of interjecting, and see, here's the issue. I actually had a problem when I heard it was a black Spider-Man, because
Oh.
that's not what I knew. That's not what I fell in love with. And then I was questioning what is going on here. Is there some sort of affirmative action happening where they're now having to replace people? No, but this is
Right.
That's what they feel. That's what a lot of people feel like. Oh, it's just affirmative action. They're just giving it to you.
But see, but that's the part that I didn't want to happen. I wanted where you have genuine, interesting characters that stand on their own.
Do you
Which
feel
is
like
what
I
I'm
stand on
doing.
your own now? Like after reading it?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh yes. I enjoyed it actually quite a bit when I went back. It's been a while since I was at the comic book shop, but yes, I enjoyed it a lot. And I mean, I'm really happy to see and listening to her. This is what she's talking about. There were no options before. And now she's talking about all these options, which I can now see how much it changed from when I was into them to now.
Right. And I've definitely come across that argument too, where it's like, oh, well, y'all just making characters to be black. But you know, and I was thinking about that today. I'm like, I get where they're coming from, but then in the same respect, when you approach Marvel world, DC world, there are multiverses. So there are literally other parallel universes where this person could be black. And so Spider-Man is a title. You know, we know Spider-Man is Peter Parker, but he can take the mask off, hand it to somebody else, and that's how we have Miles Morales as Spider-Man. So, for example, Robin, you have, 4 different Robins? 5. You know, and I'm like, so this is just a title as opposed to Dick Grayson is Robin, and this Robin, and this Robin, this Robin. It's a person filling a title, but then also with the presence of a multiverse, it begs the question, why not make them a person of color? You know, really, what's the difference? The biggest difference is that you can make, in my opinion, you can make a white character a person of color, but making a POC character white is going to be different. Because as POCs, our ethnicity dictates how we navigate the world. And that dictates our experience with who we interact with, you know, how we, if we are superheroes, it's like, I'm black and a superhero? You know, that adds on to the complexity. And so, it's more than just doing this for black's sake. You know, we have a lot of black characters, but again, they aren't mainstream household names like Storm, Black Panther. You know, some people might not know about Cyborg. I think he's a household name. You know, so we don't have that yet, and I feel that making, or kind of retconning in a sense, more known superheroes as POCs, it helps with representation, and I can actually say, oh snap, I could be like Spider-Man because he looks like him. You know, and it's a very open possibility, you know, like it kind of to go off on a tangent, I was thinking about the new Iron Fist that's coming out on Netflix. And it would have been so cool to see Danny Rand be an Asian American character, because I recently found out that Misty Knight's teammate Colleen Wing, she's Japanese. I'm like, oh snap, that would have been so dope, having an Asian American character teamed up with Luke Cage, and Misty Knight teamed up with Colleen. Boom. You good to go all the way around. Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's just making characters, you know, black for black's sake. It's deeper than that, at least for me.
Anybody else have a question?
You know, I was talking about what you were talking about earlier about the first, you know, when Spider-Man first came out in 2000. I would have thought Blade, played by Wesley Snipes, started it all, but it's just he wasn't mainstream at the same time. But Blade was made by white artists as well. And in the Daredevil movie where Michael Clark Duncan, you know, rest in peace, he played the Kingpin, which was basically a white man. And there are people, you know, got criticized about why they have a black actor playing the Kingpin. So you really think that was like an alternate universe in the way the Daredevil movie with Ben Affleck and
Replacing those characters. You notice they've done that before, like the whole Nick Fury thing, having Sam Jackson play Nick Fury. I think it was easier to get minor characters and kind of like say, well, we don't have to have all white men. Maybe we can like slide a black guy in, and it's not a major role, so it won't be that big of a deal, you know. But I thought, But you know what the issue I think I had at first was the idea of branding. Like the idea that, like, you know, the problem with them changing the Redskins now is that people follow the Washington Redskins for like 50 years, and then all of a sudden you say you want to change the name, right? That there's a certain segment of the population where that's their childhood, and that's what they've always known, and then that's like so deep, they have emotional connections to this logo, and then all of a sudden you just don't say, now we're going to switch it because we just realized it's wrong. So those are the complexities in some of this, while they're trying to change the established characters to these multiple universes that they're creating. But I think it's good. It's a good thing, though. It's a good thing.
Anybody else? Questions? You got a question for Angela?
All right, so I have a question for you now. So we're talking about the community has grown. I know so far from our last couple of years, especially being February, we are in the middle of hashtag 28 Days of Black Cosplay. So,
I didn't know that.
yeah. It's the favorite thing in the world. If you can, go on Twitter, Instagram, whatever, check it out. Hashtag 28 Days of Black Cosplay. A lot of people in the cosplay community post and share each other every single day. We don't get featured, we don't get prominent views in the cosplay world, so we decided to support each other. How does that feel now, seeing hashtag 28 Days of Black Cosplay, like from when you started about 7 years ago?
It warms my heart. It really warms my heart. I love it, especially when I see Black families cosplaying together. Oh my God, that's just adorable. Especially when they cosplay as like Incredibles or something like that. And it's something that I can't remember who started it. It wasn't Black Girl Nerds.
I remember her name. Kahani, I believe. Yeah, she started on Twitter.
Yes.
And it just kind of blew up.
It blew up, and I think part of the reason why it blew up was because Black Girl Nerds got a hold of it, and they have a huge following. But yeah, it's a great. I love seeing it. I really do. But and there's also a community here called the Blurs of Northeast Florida. So it's on Facebook. We're also on meetup.com. So we usually try to have a meetup once a month. And we may have more than one if a new movie is coming out that everybody wants to go and see. So if you get a chance to take a look at that, go ahead.
Would you explain more about cosplay? This is the first time I've ever heard of cosplay.
Cosplaying or costume play is when you take a character and you bring it to life. I'm more of a casual cosplayer. I do it mostly for fun, to be able to go to different cons and
You said cons, comic conventions.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, bring down all the terms.
and to go around, take pictures, and just have fun. There are more serious cosplayers. Some of them are hard barbers, and what they do, they will actually act out the characters. They have different communities where you'll find some of them in like medieval communities where they will create the entire outfit from that particular time and act as if they were in that particular time. They do that for games as well. So it's depending on how good you are and how much either notoriety or fame you can receive, you can make good money being a cosplayer as well. So,
And like, to roll off of that, how many of you all have ever been to a Comic-Con or anime con or a convention? Okay, so cool.
I plan to. There was one, I think there's one in Collective Con coming up. I was going to, I was going to ask her if it was going.
Okay, sweet. Yeah. So basically, I've been to a few cons. The biggest one I've been to is New York Comic Con, and it was amazing. So if you have like a favorite character, you're going to see that favorite character. And me, I'm a gamer, so I love video games. I saw Sora and Riku from Kingdom Hearts. I saw Deadpool. I saw Wolverines, Magnetos, Nightwings, and it's literally people dressed up as these characters and bringing them to life. but it's so cool because it's the characters that I read about, that I see, that I play on games. I'm like, oh my gosh, you're real. And then when they really get into like the character, for example, Wolverine, and get the real deep voice. It's like, yo, my character is real. Like, are you serious? And you just get so excited because what you love and the games that you played and everything that you enjoyed as a kid and even as an adult, it's right there in front of you. You know, I saw, how many know about the Power Rangers? Old school Power Rangers. Cool, there we go. Now I'm speaking somebody's language, okay. So, a friend of mine, right, so a friend of mine, he's a painter, and so him and his group go to different conventions. And a friend of his cosplays as the White Ranger, full outfit and everything. So the original White Ranger even caught wind of it, signed a helmet, and gave it to him. And so he literally goes to cons and he just gets paid to wear his outfit. But when he's in full White Ranger attire, where he's like, it's morphin' time, boom, I'm like, it's so amazing. So that's the fan side of the convention. And I think you...
Yeah, one of the the Black Ranger, Johnny Allenbosch is going to be here in Jacksonville.
Who?
Johnny Allenbosch,
Adam.
he was the
Oh,
voice
Adam.
of Bleach.
Hey, I mean, he ain't Zach though, like,
He was also
but it's not Zach.
Zach, right.
Right, you know, but Johnny Allenbosch is dope because he was, I think he was Nero in Devil May Cry.
Yeah, you're there, right? Ichigo, Bleach.
Yeah, he was Ichigo too, that's right. That's right.
God.
He's gonna be, I gotta try him. Yeah.
I think he's going to be at the Con next month. I seen him on the website, so he's going to be there. So.
We gonna see.